All right, ready to dive deep. Today, we're tackling a big one. Can living a just life actually make you happier? We're exploring Plato's arguments from the Republic, and our source material, Philosophy Podcast, frames them as 3.5 arguments.
3.5. Okay, that's got me intrigued. I'm curious to see what they mean by that.
Me too. So, argument number 1, the healthy soul. Plato compares the soul to, like, a city, and says justice brings harmony and order, just like a well-functioning society.
It's a great analogy, right? He's basically saying a just soul. It's like a well-run city where everything's working together, everyone's in their place, things just work.
Yeah, and the podcast uses this analogy of like a balanced diet. Our bodies need different nutrients. Our souls need different parts working together to, really be happy. Makes you wonder what a justice deficiency would look like, huh?
Interesting question. If we're going by Plato's idea, I'd say a justice deficiency would probably look like a lot of inner turmoil, lack of peace, maybe even feeling lost.
Like inner chaos. The opposite of that well-functioning city. But think about it. This idea of a healthy soul really lines up with what we know today about, like, mental well-being and emotional regulation. It's like Plato was way ahead of his time.
Absolutely. And what's so cool is he connects this inner harmony to the well-being of the whole city. Like a just person contributes to a just society, a ripple effect.
Okay, but what about the other side? Argument number 2 is all about the misery of the tyrant. The person consumed by their desires, always afraid of losing what they have.
Yeah, Plato describes them as constantly trying to, like, fill a bucket that's got a hole in the bottom. It doesn't matter how much power or wealth they get, it's never enough.
The podcast compares them to a nosy neighbor, always watching, interfering, never really at peace. Kind of a funny image, but it really shows that constant paranoia.
And that paranoia, it comes from always wanting more. They're driven by, like, fear of loss, never truly feeling content. It makes you think about those in power today, The ones who prioritize personal gain over the good of everyone else. Are they falling into that same trap Plato was talking about?
That's a good point. Makes you think. Makes his ideas feel super relevant to what's going on today. But let's move on to argument number 3. This is where it gets really interesting. It focuses on the philosopher.
Right. Here Plato says philosophers experience a higher kind of pleasure through knowledge and understanding. They're not chasing, those temporary pleasures. Their joy is all about the pursuit of truth.
And this is where the podcast uses that analogy. Gourmet food versus fast food. Fast food might be satisfying in the moment, but gourmet food that offers a deeper, longer-lasting satisfaction. But hold on, is Plato just saying that all nerds are happy?
Not quite. Remember, he's talking about a very specific kind of pleasure, the one that comes from really engaging with complex ideas. It's not just about knowing facts. It's about that aha moment when you actually understand something. Think about a time when you learned something new and it just clicked. That feeling of intellectual satisfaction, that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, I get that. Like solving a puzzle, finally understanding something you've been struggling with. It's different from, winning the lottery or something.
Exactly. It's a deeper, more intrinsic kind of pleasure. And this connects back to his idea of the soul as a city. A just soul, like a well-governed city, it prioritizes wisdom and knowledge.
So it's not just about being conventionally good. It's about developing a mind that seeks truth. All right, on to the grand finale, the half argument. The unity of the soul was the deal with this one.
Well, this is where Plato stresses how important internal harmony is. He says a just soul, it's unified, it's harmonious. But an unjust soul, it's fragmented, conflicted. Like, imagine running a marathon, but you only have one shoe. That's what living with an unjust, divided self is like. You're always tripping over your own internal struggles.
So a just life isn't just about what you do. It's about creating inner alignment, like all the parts of yourself working together.
Exactly. A unified soul is at peace with itself. And that, according to Plato, is the key to lasting happiness. It's like a well-rehearsed orchestra, every instrument contributing to one beautiful sound, instead of a bunch of musicians just playing random notes.
It's interesting, right? Thinking about how these ideas from Plato apply to us today. Like, we're always getting these messages, be more, have more, get more followers.
Like we're living in that bucket with a hole, always wanting more, never feeling like it's enough. But Plato's saying maybe we need to look inward, right? Cultivate that inner harmony instead of always searching for external validation. Exactly. He's asking us to think about what we're really building inside ourselves. Like, are we making an inner city based on greed, competition, or are we, building a community within ourselves, one based on cooperation, respect?
That's powerful. If our soul is like a city, then developing those virtues, Plato talks about wisdom, courage, temperance, justice. It's like good urban planning, but for our inner world.
I like that. And just like a well-planned city, a well-ordered soul, it has the potential to be happier, more fulfilled. But it's not something that just happens. We have to work at it, cultivate those virtues, bring them into balance.
So it's not enough to just read philosophy. We have to actually put these ideas into practice. It makes me wonder, though, was Plato being a bit too idealistic? Like, are all tyrants really miserable? Are all philosophers truly happy? There have to be exceptions.
That's a good point. Plato uses these archetypes to get his point across, but people are more complex than that. I'm sure there are tyrants who find some kind of satisfaction in their power, and philosophers who, struggle with their own inner turmoil.
So maybe it's not so black and white. Maybe it's more about recognizing those tendencies in ourselves. Like, are we letting our desires control us? Or are we looking for knowledge and truth? Are we feeding that chaos or fostering harmony?
Exactly. It's about seeing the potential for both the tyrant and the philosopher inside all of us, and then making choices, consciously choosing to cultivate those qualities that lead to a more fulfilling life.
It's pretty amazing how these ideas, written thousands of years ago, still feel so relevant. I have to admit, when I first started reading Plato, I was a little intimidated. But discussing it like this, it's pretty relatable.
Totally. He was dealing with these, big human questions we still ask today. What does it mean to live a good life? How do we find true happiness?
And I think it's refreshing,
Yeah.
Because it's a different perspective. We're always told to acquire more, be more. But Plato's saying, look inward. Cultivate a just soul, and maybe, you'll find happiness from within.
It's a powerful message, especially now. In this world where everything's so fast-paced, so connected, it reminds us that real fulfillment, it doesn't come from achievements or possessions. It comes from inner harmony, from living a life that aligns with your values.
And speaking of connection, I think what we're doing here on the deep dive, it really fits with that idea. Exploring these big concepts, challenging assumptions, hopefully, helping our listeners understand themselves and the world a little better.
Absolutely. We want everyone listening to join the conversation, share these ideas, talk about it with your friends, your family, start a discussion. What does it really mean to live a fulfilling life?
That's what the deep dive is all about, right?
Right.
Making these complex ideas understandable and starting those interesting conversations. And if you're enjoying this journey with us, hey, subscribe to the show. Share it with someone who might appreciate a little bit of Plato in their life.
Because the more we engage with these timeless questions, the closer we get to, uncovering some really profound truths. Truths that can lead to a more meaningful life.
Okay, so we've covered the first three arguments, the healthy soul, the tyrant's misery, and the philosopher's pleasure. But what about that mysterious half argument, the unity of the soul? What's Plato really getting at with that one?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. And that's exactly what we're going to explore in the final part of our deep dive.
So stick around, everyone. We're about to unravel that last piece of the puzzle and see how this idea of a unified soul, how it all fits together with what we've been talking about.
Trust me, this is one you won't want to miss. Plato's thoughts on this, they're just as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago.
Okay, deep divers, we're back. Ready for the final part of our Plato exploration.
We've looked at the healthy soul, delved into the tyrant's misery, even got a taste of the philosopher's pleasure.
And now for that mysterious half argument, the unity of the soul, like the missing piece of the puzzle, right? Completing Plato's picture of a just and happy life.
Remember that marathon analogy? Trying to run with just one shoe? Plato uses that to show, the struggles of a divided self.
So not just about what you do on the outside, but about inner alignment, like getting all the parts of yourself working together. But what does that actually look like?
Well, picture this. A charioteer trying to control two horses. One's noble, obedient, the other wild, impulsive. That's how Plato sees the soul. Reason's the charioteer, guiding our desires, our emotions toward virtue.
Okay, so we have these different parts inside us. It's about getting them to work together, not against each other.
Right. When reason's in control, we get harmony. But when those desires, those emotions run wild, that's when we get that inner conflict, that feeling of being pulled in different directions.
Like when you should do one thing, but you just feel like doing the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where the virtues come in. Wisdom, it helps us see the right path. Courage, it gives us the strength to follow it. Temperance keeps those desires in check. And justice, well, it makes sure every part of the soul is treated fairly.
So it's not about like ignoring our desires or emotions. It's more about finding balance, like that harmony where they work with reason.
Exactly. And that harmony, that's the key to the lasting happiness Plato keeps talking about. Not the kind you get from, possessions or anything like that, but that deep contentment, the kind that comes from living a virtuous life.
I've always struggled with the idea of virtue, to be honest.
Yeah.
It feels kind of, old-fashioned.
I get that, but think of it less as a bunch of rules and more like a guide to really thrive,
Okay, so not about being perfect, but about trying to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a journey. It's ongoing, right? A lifetime of learning, growing.
This whole idea of a unified soul, it's pretty deep. Yeah. And it connects with so many other traditions too, right? Eastern philosophy, modern psychology, all of that.
It speaks to something like universal. That desire for wholeness, for inner peace. And Plato's reminding us that peace, we don't just stumble upon it, we have to cultivate it.
Okay, but how do we do that? If we're always told to get more, have more, how do we, shift our focus to becoming more, to that inner unity?
It starts with looking inward, recognizing those different forces inside us, the desires, the motivations, all of that. And then choosing. Aligning ourselves with reason, with virtue.
Like building a strong foundation for our lives, but one that's based on inner strength and integrity, not just what other people think.
Yeah, and on that foundation, we can build a life that's not just, successful on the surface, but actually meaningful, fulfilling.
I've got to say, after really diving into all this with Plato, I feel, a little more hopeful. Like he's given us this roadmap for navigating life, for finding real happiness.
And that roadmap, it's not just for each of us individually, right? Plato believed a just society, it starts with just people.
So it's not just about our happiness, it's about creating a better world for everyone.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to, keep having this conversation, sharing these ideas, challenging each other to really think about what it means to live a good life, a just life.
And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Plato's pursuit of happiness. But remember, this is just the start, bro.
We hope you'll keep exploring Plato's ideas, see what resonates with you, see how you can use these insights in your own life.
And hey, if you enjoyed this deep dive, why not subscribe? Tell your friends about it. The more we think about these big questions, the better we understand, ourselves, the world.
So until next time, keep those minds curious, keep searching, and never stop exploring that path to a truly happy life.